It smells amazing. Hi, my name's Helen. I'm a chef here at the Waitrose and Partners Cookery School, and today I'm going to show you how to make sticky cinnamon rolls. First thing we're going to do is prepare all of our dry ingredients in a bowl. So we've got our plain flour. We're going to add the rest of our dry ingredients. So we've got some caster sugar, some salt. This one is an easy bake yeast. This is mixed straight into the flour. You don't need to reactivate it first. I'm going to mix all of these things together to make sure that they're really well dispersed, making sure that there are no pockets of flour. So now that all of my ingredients are mixed together, I'm going to make a well in the centre so I've got somewhere for my milk to go. And my milk is already nice and warm. I've kind of brought it up to body temperature, so this is the perfect temperature for optimal yeast activity. You could use alternative milks for this recipe, so you could use your favourite plant-based milk. I would recommend something like a soy milk or a rice milk. For the full recipe, we'll put the link in the description. So now the milk's in there, we just need to start mixing it together. So I'm going around the outside, so just trying to disperse all the ingredients as efficiently as we can. So I'm kind of bringing it into the centre and cutting it into the dough. I do want to make sure that everything is well combined before I start kneading it, so it will make my life much easier. It will be a much less sticky dough to handle. So once it comes together like this, I'm going to get everything off that scraper, make sure it's all stuck together in one nice lump in the bowl. Now it's time to get this onto the bench and start kneading it by hand. So you want your bench to be really nice and clean here. You don't want any excess flour there because that will just become absorbed into the dough. Best way to go about this is quite a stiff dough, so I would always recommend having one hand to hold it in place and using the other hand to press it away and then dragging it back in on itself. So we're just kind of stretching it and folding it in. I've been a chef for 9 years now, basically been covered in flour for 9 years now, pretty much every day. And I started making enriched doughs like this when I was first training. So I trained at a restaurant in Knightsbridge in the pastry section, and we used to make brioche to go on the dinner menu, which was one of my favourite things to eat because the leftover crusts, we would always kind of scavenge those, sprinkle them with a bit of cinnamon sugar, so really similar to this recipe. So every so often when you're kneading this way, it's really important to kind of rotate the dough to make sure it's getting an even workout. So I can feel that my dough is ready now because it's so smooth, so soft and so elastic. So I'm going to try and work it into a nice round ball so that it can rise and develop a little bit of tension in the bowl. And the way that I'm doing that is just kind of dragging it across the surface, trying to create a kind of a seam underneath. You can see that it's tightening up like a balloon when you inflate a balloon. And if you press your finger into it, it will spring back quite readily as well. So that tells you that you're there. You've got plenty of gluten development, plenty of elasticity. This is ready to prove now. And just cover it with cling film and leave it to rise. We're going to leave this to prove at room temperature. Now my dough has been proving for about an hour. You can see that it's really grown in its volume. So once your dough is ready, we're going to flour the work surface with some dusting flour, and then we can use the dough scraper to just scoop the dough out onto the worktop. So I'm going to dust the surface a little bit just to stop it from sticking to my rolling pin, and then we're going to knock it back just to remove the majority of the air bubbles and flatten it into the right starting shape. So try and encourage it into a rough kind of square. That will help us to achieve the right shape when we do our final roll. And then we're going to use the rolling pin to roll it. So you can start by pulling the edges out to the sides at the initial stages just to help get the shape right. And this is a really nice activity to do on a kind of rainy Sunday afternoon. Nothing too stressful. Just kind of meditate, get to know your dough, and have something really beautiful come out of the oven at the end of it. So I've got a really nice rectangle of dough. This is ready to be rolled up. I'm going to turn it so the long side is facing me, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with some sugar. So I've got some dark muscovado sugar. So I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon in here, so just to make sure that it's really well combined with the sugar. So I'm going to spread this out by hand, just kind of making it really evenly coat the surface. Once we've got it evenly dispersed, we can just press it down, and then we're going to start rolling it up. So I always start with the bit that's closest to me, and you want to make an initial fold just to keep everything glued together. So really press that bit in, and that will help it to be tight as we roll it up, and then just gently easing it in using your thumbs on one side and your fingers on the other. This is a very satisfying thing to do. And you can kind of square off the ends, so you can press those in just to make the thickness even all the way along. So I'm going to pop it onto some cling film and just gently wrap it up. So at this point, if you wanted to, you could pop it into the freezer, and that way you can bake cinnamon rolls at any point without any of the effort. So they're just ready to go whenever you want them. So I'm going to pop it onto a tray, into the fridge, and we'll slice them up in about 20 minutes time. So my dough's been in the fridge for about 20 minutes. It's ready to cut now, as it has firmed up ever so slightly. Spray the tray with a little bit of oil spray. This is really good to stop them from sticking on there. So we need to cut this into 12 even portions. The best way to do that is to cut it in half to begin with, and then cut each half in half again, and then you've only got to get 3 even-sized pieces out of each portion. If you don't do this, then the first one tends to be much more generous than the last one. And it's really important when you're cutting through the dough that you're sliding a knife back and forth, you're not just pressing down, because that will crush the dough and it will ruin the shape that we've created here. You can kind of shape them a little bit if they've become misshapen when you've cut them, so just easing them into the right shape. So just making sure that they're nice and level, pressing down any that are looking a little bit on the bigger side, and they're sat nice and snug so that they'll grow into each other. We want to cling film them so they don't dry out while they're proving, but to stop the cling film from sticking down, you can spray it with that oil spray to keep it from gluing itself to the buns as they prove. So now we're going to leave these to prove for about 30 minutes or so, just until they're nice and puffy and they've got a good bit of spring to them. So now my buns have proved, they are doubled in size almost, and you can see that when you press into them, they're full of air, very, very delicate. So it's really important to get them into the oven as soon as they're ready to go. Pop them in for about 12 to 14 minutes until they're nice and golden on the surface. So now my buns have come out of the oven. The best way to tell if these are cooked is if you have a little feel of them. So they should be nice and springy to the touch. You can obviously tell that they're nice and golden as well, so they've got a nice bit of colour to them. And as long as they're not feeling too doughy, so if you press into them and they don't spring back, it might be that they need another 2 or 3 minutes. For the glaze, all we need to do is add some warm water to a bit of icing sugar. It's best to start slowly here so you don't end up adding too much, and just mix it through until you get a consistency that's quite thick, but that you're able to drizzle over the top of the buns. I've got a nice drizzle consistency. It's really important that we get this over the buns while they're hot so that it will glaze them and it will set, and you'll get a nice kind of crunch when you bite into them. So just making sure that I'm spreading all of that glaze across the surface. It will drizzle down the sides. It's nice and thick, so it will create a nice layer on the surface. These are definitely best eaten the day that they're made, when they're nice and fresh. But you can absolutely store them for a couple of days. You just want to make sure that they're really well wrapped in an airtight container so they're not drying out. I think the best thing that you could do with these would be to make the dough the night before and have it proved ready to go in the oven in your fridge, and then you can wake up to fresh cinnamon buns. So when you break into them, you'll see that on the inside you've got this beautiful layering of the cinnamon and the really fresh dough, lovely crust with the icing sugar on the top. It smells amazing.